Cool. Thank you, Claire, and thank you for the introduction. Now I'm going to have to be on my best behavior because I have some clients in the room, so I will promise to behave. Yeah, I'm very excited to share this content with you. It's something that I've gone down many rabbit holes myself to better understand and explore. I think it's an area that needs a lot more focus. And I'm hoping today we're just going to be touching on it because there's many human skills as you'll discover. So we can't possibly cover them all, but it's just really nice to expose us and to remind us of the power of what being a human is, and that we have these innate skills that we have not lost, but we've forgotten. In most cases, we forget the power and the impact they can actually have. And to start off with, I want to, as Claire said, I want to encourage you to please post questions and to please unmute at any stage. And I'm happy to be interrupted because my personality, I'm very poor at listening and I'm very distracted constantly and I interrupt everybody. So it's your turn to get me back. So happy to be very collaborative. This first image, I wanted to just remind us all about the world that we're currently living in. And I think we've had over the past few years, we've had some prime examples to engage with. The term that's often used about what we see there, and as you can see, it's a tornado coming towards us. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we tend to feel that our world is a little bit out of control at the moment. We're trying to bring some order into the insanity. And the term that's thrown around a lot is VUCA, which stands for being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And there's an update on that too. There's now Barney, which is an update post-COVID. But really what it's saying is that we've got to find a way to continue in this insanity, in this crazy world, in this crazy environment. And literally today what we're going to cover today is really, I like to simply put it as tools, tips, and techniques, and some tricks to help us cope. Because really, at the end of the day, that's all we've got. We've got what's innate, that's within us, that we can then use to try and to survive this insanity. So all is not lost. But what I wanted to share with you is this quick clip that has been around a while, just to once again to set the scene and the context, and it's linked to the world that we're currently in and the world that we're moving into. If you don't have sound, that's not an issue. Just it's all about wording and imagery. Right. That was very fast, and there was lots of information being thrown at you. I don't know if anybody wants to share via comments, chat, or even unmuting if there's anything that they managed to anything that jumped out at them, anything that in particular they come to the fore, or they would like to, just raise something they weren't aware of, or something they just want to refer to. Sure, Belinda.
Okay, so for me, I felt as though things on that screen were changing too fast. I couldn't keep up with it.
Exactly. That's exactly how I think how we feel. That's how you're supposed to feel. So, anybody else? It's one of those videos you need to watch a couple of times. But the essence for me is just really, it's about awareness. It's not to instill fear and anxiety, even though I think by the intensity of what was happening, you can feel overwhelmed. But really, it was the essence of was the link between human skills and digitization, and how as we currently know, the world is changing so incredibly fast, that many current roles are going to be replaced. And as the research is telling us, what many qualifications that are being studied for at the moment are going to become irrelevant. And there's many roles that in the future haven't even been thought of or even invented yet. But that's just par for the course. And what we have control over, that circle of control, is the human component. And reminding ourselves, as I said in the beginning, it's this awareness, this constant reminder that we have this innate superpower, which is being a human, that currently, and I say currently, that can't be automated, but who knows what the future will hold. But currently, we still have this as our superpower. And I think it's helpful always just to start off with just some definitions, as this topic, human skills. And here we have a beautiful image of humans, and being an African. Obviously, this is my home, and I'm aligned but I do have ancestry, originally Scottish ancestry, hence my link to Africa Scotland Business Network. I don't know if it gave me any browning points, but I do have that in my genes somewhere along the line. But I think the human component and this next image of me, being me during a training session, why I bring that to your attention, is to explain that when I first went on my journey, studying human resource management and then eventually focusing purely on learning and development, is that when I first started off in learning and development, learning was deemed something very serious and very compliant, and it was not fun. You had a task to do and a job to teach people, and that was the most important criteria. But hopefully you've all realized on your journey and how learning has changed, that learning must be a couple of things. It needs to be relevant, it needs to be topical, it needs to be practical, it needs to be in chunks, and it needs to be enjoyable, because that is how we learn. You can make any dull topic interesting, but it's how you approach it and how you put that message across. So this was me performing during a training session recently. My delegates don't look too impressed, as you can see, but it was just to show you and leads you into the next concept of a skill, because a skill for me is how I always like to unpack it and explain it. It's something that we can learn to do. It's the philosophy, old thinking around a skill, that you're born with a skill. And then the analogy I always like to use is a musical instrument. Do we have any musicians in the house today? Is there someone who's prepared to raise their hand or to type in the chat they play an instrument of any kind? Whether it's a triangle, and I'm not dishing triangles, but a guitar, a piano, a trumpet, any traditional Instruments, drums. Do we have any musicians in the house? And I'm not going to ask you to participate or to present to us. Do we have any in the house? The chats, anybody saying, referring to, no musicians. Okay, that's okay. So my analogy here is that, once again, if I asked you, why do you not play a musical instrument? And this is when I want you to type in your chats or to unmute. What is the reason why you do not play a musical instrument? If you can share that with us in the chats or unmute. Let's listen to the excuses.
When I was younger, I used to play a couple of musical instruments, but I'm not really passionate. I don't really feel the need to do it anymore.
Okay, so that's a good one. That there's no interest necessarily anymore, or you're not passionate that you want to continue with playing an instrument. What else? What are your other reasons? What is going on in the chats? Anybody referring to reasons? So these are probably the three most common reasons. I don't have a talent. I'm not talented. I don't have a gift. I don't have time, because it takes time to practice. And as you mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have the desire. And those are all legitimate excuses. But if you look at the science behind why playing an instrument is so important, we would all be playing an instrument. I have a firm viewpoint that it should be compulsory, that at birth we should be handed an instrument, and you can chop and change your instruments throughout your life, but the psychological benefits of being able to play instruments are immense. I have purchased a guitar. It's sitting in my bedroom. I haven't started yet. It's on the list to do, but it is something that I do want to tackle. And the reason why I raise this is because if you wished to and wanted to, we could all learn to play a guitar. Yes, some of us would play better than others. Some of us would pick it up more quickly because we have the natural skill or the natural talent. And some of us who are disinterested, we would, at the end of the day, still be able to churn out a song, but we're not going to necessarily be gifted or be asked to join an orchestra. But the science behind a skill is that if you're willing and you're able, you can learn something. So, there's been a lot of research on leadership, whether you're born with it or not. And the science is that we can all learn to lead, and we can all learn to be better at what we do. So most of your excuses are all just blah blah blahs. So let's actually get into what the topic of today is looking at these human skills. So what are they? So they comprise of actually hundreds of skills that we as humans have, and today is really to remind us what they are. Some of them are stuff that you're going to be practicing already, and it's probably natural to you, maybe because of the environment that you're in, or even your personality type or your strengths. Others maybe seem so obvious, and that's the beauty, I think, of having topics like this, because most of what I'm going to share with you today, you have already covered. You've already met in your life. You've already unpacked it in some way. It's just to remind us of why they are so important. So the very first one we're going to take on, and as you're going to see, a lot of them overlap and are interlinked. The first one is this ability to relate to others. And on researching this topic, there are a number of superheroes that I follow around what we're going to be talking about. And some of you may have come across them, and I'll obviously will refer to them as we go through it. But this first human skill that we all have innately, and as I said earlier, the more you practice a skill, the better you get at it. So yes, some of us, it just comes naturally. And for others of us, we have to work much harder at it. And that's okay. That's the reality. But we all have the ability to get better at it. It's not about perfection. When I discovered that saying around that there's no such thing as perfection, there's progress. It also had a huge impact on my outlook on life. So we can strive for progress and improvement, but unfortunately for all the perfectionists out there, there's no such thing as perfection. It's not attainable. You're striving for betterment. So the ability to relate to others is really about connecting, it's about acknowledging, and it's about understanding. So if you think of yourself as a human being, we rarely engage with people that show an interest in us. When we sense that somebody is not showing us an interest, showing an interest in us, we disengage. It may, depending on your personality, it may actually hurt your feelings, or you might go, I don't care less. That person, I can write that person off. Whereas, according to others, if we don't show you attention, you're actually going to become heart sore by it. So it's such an important thing to remember that everybody is worthy of being related to. And you see how it is such a simple concept, yet I don't think we spend enough time, because it does take time, to spend time with others. And if you are a member of a family or you're a member of a team, you should acknowledge that that's what it does take to better understand someone or to improve any relationship. You actually need to spend time with somebody. The second one is communication, and this is really a topic that's been heavily researched. And once again, it always comes up in the top 3 of any culture survey of most global organizations, is that we generally are very poor at communication. We have this thought that if we say something, we don't need to follow up. And if I say it to somebody, and those of you who have children, and those of you who are parents, and those of you who are managers of teams, that we give the message and we then hand it over, or we send the email, and our job is done. And that's just one step in the communication process. So it's fundamental that we ensure that when we say things or when we do things, that we follow up and that we check for understanding. And that's probably where we fall flat, is checking for this understanding. We assume that people know what we mean. And in this world of virtual, it's even compounded the problem, because we lacking, which we'll see just now, body language. So we're not seeing whether the person has understood us. We're only hearing or seeing the written word, whether somebody has engaged with us or not. So strong communication, once again, you have to spend time there. You have to check yourself first, whether you are communicating effectively or whether you're communicating clearly. And then, very importantly, whether the receiver, I'm sure you all remember that from your school days, has taken on that communication and has understood what you are meaning. The third one is patience with others. And once again, personality. This one can be very problematic for some people, especially action-orientated deliverers who need to get stuff done. They expect someone, you give them a task, and the person must do it. So patience is, as the saying goes, is most definitely a virtue. It's so important to learn to practice keeping a level head, that we are all different human beings. Some people, when you give them something to do, can react or respond instantly. Other people need to process. Other people need to think before they can give you feedback and answer. And you have to understand that about human beings. We're not all the same. And we can't think less of a person because they're not instantly reactionary, or because they take a long time to respond. So my lesson in life I used to think I was a patient person until I had 4 children, and I seem to have lost my patience on that journey. Some people say parenthood teaches them patience, but I think they're in denial. Nonetheless, patience is essential, because if you're not patient, you're going to miss out on stuff. Once again, you're going to miss out on gems of information and gems of knowledge from other people if you're too quick to move on. Are there any comments in the chat before I move on to the next, or any questions anybody's got on those first 3 before I move on to the next one? Cool. Right, trust. here we go. As I said, as you should see by now, these are all statements that you have seen before and you have come across this content before. It's about contextualizing it. It's about giving it perspective. So trust, once again, and I'm sure you've all experienced that with personal relationships, with working in business, when we lack trust, oh boy, is that going to lead to many problems. And once again, if we're not confrontational, we're not going to necessarily tackle an issue, versus if we are confrontational, we're going to butt heads because we're going to attack somebody because we want to resolve a problem. The lack, I think it's important to start with the lack thereof. So the lack of trust breeds many things. When there's no trust in a personal relationship, if there's no trust between you and your children, with your work colleagues, it leads to things such as uncertainty, disillusionment, disappointment. In the culture space, we talk a lot about engagement. Where there's no trust, we're not going to engage ourselves. If I feel that my person in my life, whether at work or home, trusts me, I'm going to be more willing to do stuff. If there's a lack of trust, I'm going to be very unsure to proceed. So it's so necessary to tackle this trust word, because if it's not tackled, a relationship in any space is not going to be healthy. And I am in no way a person who has discovered the magic to this. It's for me, what I've learned is it's a journey, and sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it wrong. And when it doesn't happen, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to work at it. And it's almost, we have to draw up a list of people in our lives that we are battling with when it comes to a trust equation, and then building up the courage to tackle these. If they're not impacting you, then I wouldn't waste your energy. But if they are important in your life and they're impacting you, we need to tackle them. Right, now one of my favorites is moving on to empathy. And once again, if you Google empathy, you are going to be inundated with hundreds and thousands of articles and videos and clips and commentary on this topic. Any research when it comes to leadership, it is the number one most important leadership skill to have, far from the days when I started off, where empathy did not even feature. It did not exist. It was seen as a weakness. It was seen as a fluffy, nice to have nonsense. Yet now you won't come across any global organization that does not include empathy in their leadership development. I've been very fortunate to work with a South African hospital group called Netcare, and they are running. It's the only organization that I'm aware of in South Africa. They're running a program on empathy and compassion to drive this concept, to raise the importance of empathy and compassion, and it's really focused on every single employee who works at Netcare. And the science behind empathy is that, and why they've run it, is that we're not all born with empathy. It's some of us are born oozing it. Some of us make statements like, I'm not empathetic, I'm a direct person, I just tell someone how it is. And you go to somebody else if you want empathy. But we all innately have it. Once again, we've got to practice it to get better at it. The science behind empathy is that when we give empathy, it can lead to burnout. And that's the link in the medical industry. So when you give constantly, it drains you because it saps your energy. The key is to identify what are the things that give you energy. So fortunately, thank goodness, we have the ability to re-energize. And for us, it's all unique as individuals, and it's completely different from one person to another. It could be a person, it could be an event, or it could be something that you do. So for me, to regain my energy, I have to go to the beach. I have to spend time gardening. I have to exercise. If I don't do those things, then I'm not my full self, and I know that I'm sapped. And for all of us, it could be baking, cooking, sewing. I was going to say eating and drinking, but I don't think those are energizers. But it could be meditating, praying, grandchildren, exercise, you have to find what gives you energy, because then you can show empathy. If you don't find that energy, that is why people say, I'm kaput, I'm finished. It's kaput, a South African word. I'm finished, I'm exhausted, I have no more energy, I'm drained, I'm sapped. Those are the words that come out of our mouths, and those should be our warning signs and our flags to inform us that we are not on track. And Brené Brown has summed it up beautifully in this quote. Empathy has no script. There's no right way or wrong way to it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting and communicating that incredible healing message of you're not alone. And I've seen a lovely analogy of a iceberg as to why empathy is so important, because we only see the tip of the iceberg. Under the water is so much more that we don't necessarily know about, or it's stuff that we don't want to expose the world to. And every one of us has an iceberg. So that's why empathy is important. So when somebody treats you poorly, behaves badly, behaves differently, you don't understand them, iceberg is where you go, because you're not seeing what's under the water. It's not your responsibility to fix them, make it better, take it away. It's to just acknowledge that we're all on our own journey and we all have our own challenges, and that, as do I. And it's to remind us why I don't have to be drawn into somebody else's drama or somebody else's problem, because they're on their own journey. Another skill that I wasn't born with, but I'm practicing every day. My family, and especially my wife, and a couple of my colleagues have informed me that this is the area that I need to work on, is this active listening. And as you see, it's directly linked to empathy. So when you empathize with somebody, you need to do two things. You need to listen and you need to suspend judgment. So we can't interrupt when somebody speaks, even if what they're saying upsets us or we do not like. We have to allow them to finish, and that is very difficult in the South African context. We are an exceptionally multicultural society, and often we completely misunderstand each other. We're very adamant about our viewpoints. We're very pig-headed about our opinions, yet where we fall flat is that it's all right to be different and to think differently, but we have to allow someone to speak. We have to, rather than rejecting or shunning or putting somebody down, we need to seek a deeper understanding. It doesn't mean your views are going to change. It's about saying, I don't understand why you do that. I don't understand why you behave that way, but I want to understand where it comes from. What makes you say those things? What makes you behave that way? But what we tend to do, and as you know, in social media now, we cancel you. You get cancelled if we don't like what you're saying, and that's very problematic. It's far easier said than done, because when it's something offensive, naturally we become defensive. But we can't become defensive because there's something innate in us. And if you look at, if you recall the iceberg, it's something that's coming from underneath the water. That is the reason why we are becoming defensive. So tips around listening is that we all need to be better at listening. Our problem is as the next slide clearly was written for me, we listen. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. We listen with the intent to reply. So as somebody is speaking to me, I'm already formulating my response. Instead, what I should be doing is listening with intent of what they're saying, allow them to finish, and then to move on. And as I confessed, it's a work in progress. Sometimes I get it right, and when I get it wrong, it's a reminder, whoop, I failed here. Oops, sorry, I'm sorry I interrupted. Reflect and try the next time. The next human skill I want to unpack is this genuine interest in others. And as you have already seen, the link to all the previous skills. And here we have to be real, we have to be sincere, and we have to be authentic. I'm sure you've experienced somewhere along your life, whether we're at school or in a social gathering or at work, where you have been speaking to someone and they lose interest in you because somebody else comes into the room and they're distracted. And mid conversation, they're off. And you suddenly left. Like, what was that? They've just dumped me for somebody else and somebody more important or something more interesting. And as if we can tap into showing genuine interest in another human being, that is so powerful, because it just shows that I see you, I hear you, you're important to me. But once again, you have to be sincere about it. You can't pretend. And I've done it many times in my life, unfortunately, I confess. I've pretended to be interested. When somebody doesn't stop talking and you've been cornered by somebody at some social gathering and they don't stop yakking, and you just want to get out of there. But maybe my personality is too polite to remove myself. So I will just stay there, and I've switched off, but I just keep nodding. And some people get it. You should. If you have high IQ, you will pick it up. The person's not interested, but other people's IQ is not necessarily where it should be, and they're not picking up that your conversation is becoming very boring. So we also need to check on ourselves. So, like I'm doing now, waffling on for half an hour on this topic, but it is very important because what you're really doing at the end of the day, I've had to bring it down to one word, is that you care. Care enough to spend time with you, to show an interest in who you are and what you offer. Flexibility. Okay, so this is something I haven't had a problem with personally. So flexibility for me, I've always been a believer in change for the sake of change, and adapting, and I think it's highly essential that we practice this, because as you saw by that intro, is that things are changing constantly. We have to be able to change, and we're going to talk about our views and our beliefs and our backgrounds and our morals and our biases shortly, but we have to be open to doing things differently and not being set in our ways. And some of us, our personality types, we love to plan, and we must stick to the plan. So don't come along and change the plan. If the sun is shining and you're planning to go to the beach, and you wake up in the morning and you say, no, I don't want to go to the beach, let's go to a movie. Now, the planners are like, no, we decided we're going to the beach. Don't come with your top changing nonsense that you want to go and watch a movie instead. So it's a balance. We shouldn't be changing for the sake of changing. There should always be a valid reason. We need to investigate as to why, and we need to always challenge the status quo. But sometimes what works doesn't need to be changed. It doesn't always need to be broken. Sometimes it's not always broken. Sometimes it just needs to be tweaked. And other times we have to do a complete overhaul. Another human skill is good judgment. And here we can talk a lot around concepts that pertain to wisdom, concepts that pertain to your gut feel, concepts that pertain to your experience. So during our life journey, we pick up stuff along the way. Some of it is unnecessary. Some of it is very helpful. We have to discern. So discernment is another critical human skill that is necessary, especially in this day and age where we're bombarded with information, we're bombarded with content, we're bombarded with fake news. How do we decide what is true and what is not? And I think, that's a skill that for me is so essential, as they all are, but in particular, this discernment of deciding when we take on something or when we believe something, and when we need to question and go, this is, I need to question this. I may not know what the answer is, but just something does not feel right. And we need to learn to tap into that far better than we currently do. Tap into that gut feel, present yourself, do your research, do you get the evidence, but then, only then can you then tap into your gut feel. So this is where we blend head and heart. Head and heart are essential. we have to take into both accounts. Some of us naturally lean in a head space, and some of us are more heart space. So there's this discomfort of sometimes having to tap into a space we're not necessarily familiar with or comfortable with. Yet, good judgment, we do need to expose ourselves to different things in different areas before we make a judgment call. Persuasion, the art of persuasion. There have been many movies and books written on this topic, and I think persuasion is pretty obvious. We live in a world where we have our viewpoints, and we came from a world where in order to change stuff, you force people. So if you didn't want to change, you were wrong. If you changed, you were good. And it wasn't about consultation. It wasn't about why. It was do as you are told. Today's world, and hopefully the world we're moving into, and the generation that is coming through into the place of work at the moment, is all about why am I doing it? What's the purpose to it? And what's in it for me? Show me that. Organizations that can offer me opportunities of growth and are part of society are an organization I want to work for. So companies can't live in the bubble. So when it comes to persuasion, we need to tap into how do we get people to do something differently. And there's some beautiful research on this topic, but it really is about this word. Those of you in the learning space that talk about nudging, it's about nudging somebody to do something differently. It's not forcing them, but encouraging, nudging, pointing in the right direction. We all change at a different pace, and that can be very frustrating depending on your personality type, because we want things done instantly, where others are going, but why, but how, but when, but tomorrow, I'll get there, just leave me alone. And I can see why that can frustrate people immensely. But we have to realize that if we get to understand our family members, our friends, our colleagues, our team members, if we understand each person, they're all on a different journey, and they're going to need different time and different energy to get to where they need to go. So there's no quick fix to persuasion. There's no quick fix to change, because some of us are trailblazers and some of us are going to wait right at the very end of the queue to see what everybody else is doing. Our prime current topical examples are COVID and being vaccinated. That there are 9 categories of people who choose not to be vaccinated. So it's not as simple as being vaxxed or not being vaxxed. And you have to tackle each 9 of those categories of people in a different way, ranging from conspiracy theorists to simply, I don't feel I need it because I'm healthy. So you can't brush everybody, paint everyone with the same stroke. Negotiation skills. Yep, that's been around a while. Many organizations used to offer this as a training intervention. There are many careers that is part and parcel of what you expected to do. But negotiation is something that is necessary if we want to get stuff done. If you want to convince somebody, if you're putting in a proposal, if you're trying to win people over, we do need to negotiate. And as you can see, it's very closely linked to persuasion. I need to believe you. I need to believe your content. If I'm a head person, I'll go with your feelings. And if I'm a heart person, I'll go with your feelings. If I'm a head person, I want the facts. Show me the science, show me the evidence, and then I'll follow you. So if you are having to drag a team, drag family, be aware of that, because you can't expect head people to go with heart and heart people to go with the head. You've got to get the buy-in from both types. It's a lovely skill to understand, because if you get that right, you can bring everybody with you on your journey. My open mind, having an open mind. Yes, you would think as South Africans too that we should be the world leaders in being open-minded. We should be the world leaders in diversity and inclusion, and yet we probably fail terribly at this human skill. And it's not generic to South Africa; it's a universal issue, because if you think back to the analogy of the iceberg, it's all the stuff that sits under the iceberg: our belief system, our background, our upbringing, our biases, our tradition, our culture that we hang on to. And when we meet somebody new for the first time, we throw that at the person. I normally use the vomit, but that's a bit harsh. We vomit all that stuff underneath the water at a person, and they have to live up to our very high expectations. We hold on to this belief system. And going back to what I said earlier, instead of being set in our ways, which makes us very boring, very dull, and very irrelevant, we need to investigate why we think the way we do, or why others think differently to us. Rather explore, be curious as to why people behave the way they do or say the things that they do, why they look the way they do or come across the way they do. Instead of rejecting it, let us rather seek a deeper understanding. And you never know, you could be exposed to something and even change your mind. And we've been taught that changing our mind is not good. We've been taught that changing your mind is a weakness. It means that you weren't strong in your belief system. It's quite the opposite. So the research shows us by changing our mind, from a neuroscience perspective, we are open to new things. It means we are open to unlearn and to relearn and to take on something new, which will keep us healthy mentally and emotionally, rather than holding on to something just because we were brought up that way. And I could give you many, many examples. Traditionally here in South Africa and many Western cultures, when a man and woman enter a room, the Western culture is that the man will open the door for the woman and the woman must go in first. Traditional cultures is that the man goes in first because he's there to seek out any danger before he allows the woman into the room. And there's a typical example of how we can misunderstand each other. We think that somebody's being rude, when actually they are doing polar opposite. They're showing respect. Eye contact, the big traditional versus Western. Traditional is that you show respect by looking away or looking down to someone that you respect, and Western way is that you look directly into somebody's eyes. And once again, you can see how that can lead to misunderstanding and confusion. So if we don't understand, ask. Okay, there's the discomfort of going to ask. Rather than keeping quiet and judging, let us go and explore and go and ask somebody as to why they do things differently. And then, interestingly enough, humor. Who would have thought? So there's this powerful human skill of a great sense of humor. And I think humor is a great diffuser, is the word I was looking for. So we're all different. So some people have dry humor. Some people are good at telling jokes. Others aren't. Some people are quick-witted. And some people are long-winded. So fortunately, there are many types of humor. And sometimes different cultures misunderstand each other's humor. And if you just think generally the difference between American humor, because I think that's humor that's exposed to most of us around the world on TV, and British humor, very different. And we will take a leaning towards one or the other, but both are entertaining. So I think humor, we forget the power of humor, and often we default to humor when we're uncomfortable, and that's the science behind that is a way of dealing with stuff. So when something becomes too much, we sometimes tend to delve into humor because it sometimes breaks the ice and lightens the mood in order for us to move forward. Because if there's no humor, it becomes very serious and very dull. And then knowing your audience is a human skill that is really underestimated. We don't necessarily take that into account as often as we should. So who are we talking to? Who are we engaging with? You need to relate to the people that you are engaging with. In South Africa, we have 11 official languages. We have 3 capitals. That in itself is complex. Yet we find a way to manage those complex waters. So it's very easy, yes, when your audience is preschoolers, or your audience is of a particular generation or a particular culture group or a particular race, then we feel more comfortable because we're talking to a homogeneous group. But if we remind ourselves that nothing is homogeneous, because even within a culture, even within a gender, even within a race, an age group, we are unique humans, we're unique beings. So we have to allow that space to be flexible. We have to also take into account the language we use. So it's complex, but the more you prepared and the more you in touch with different generations, different diversities, you will then be more comfortable in engaging with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, because we have to. That's part of life. We're not going to only engage with people who look like us and sound like us. We should be engaging with people that are all very different from us. That is, to me, ultimately our true test is our circle. And I'm very guilty of that. Who is our circle of friends? Who is our circle of influence? Are they all the same? Are they from the same economic background? Are they from the same culture? Are they from the same language, age group? It makes it all very boring. If you think about it, we're missing out on gems from different areas of diversity. And then honesty is another human skill that is sometimes, I think in this day and age, we have battled with it when it comes to belief in others and what people are saying. The complexities around, going back to COVID, when COVID initially hit our shores, it was something that nobody had experienced, not even the experts. So everybody was learning as we went along, and we got better at it as we grew. Here in South Africa, even with the in KZN with our latest flooding, sadly, what's come out is, the government has been, they were very quick to respond and react. But the first thing people have been saying is, well, if we try and raise money, where's the money going to go? We as South Africans are very skeptical about corruption. So instead of people contributing, people are going, well, I don't know if I can contribute, because where's that money going to go? So do you see how honesty and trust can completely mess up your plans if you're not deemed to be honest or trustworthy? I did touch on this awareness of body language, but yeah, this is in a virtual world. We battling with this terribly. We as human beings, we learn from people's bodies. Most of our communication comes from our bodies, and yet we're currently using mostly voice or written word, and we're missing out on so much information. So that's why, as we spoke about earlier, I'm a firm believer when we have virtual meetings that you have your camera on. It's just more human to do that, and you can pick up on nuances and facial expressions, but we're missing out on the rest of the body, which also tells us so much. And there's amazing research. Amy Cuddy, for example, has done this amazing research on how we behave and power poses. And there's many others that I think what I'm trying to mention here is how we underestimate the power of the body language. And then we're almost there. Problem solving, yeah, it's a skill set that's essential in this. If you think about the VUCA world that we're going into, and things are changing, and things have to be flexible and adaptive, you have to have the ability to problem solve and see things in a different way, and not hang on to something that becomes precious. I know in the learning and development space, and any invention space, when someone creates something, it becomes precious, and we don't want to change it because it works. And somebody comes with a suggestion, a change, and you're like, no, this is the only concept. This is the only prototype. This has worked. Why must we now type typewriters have been around forever. Why would we now suddenly have personal computers? What nonsense! And we know the story around that. So when do you adapt, and when do you say, let's stick with this? This still has a life, and that's probably ultimately the challenge that we have, is deciding what and when we need to change and when we need to stay the same. And then the last skill I want to talk about is actual leadership skill, and so much has changed around this topic. The image here is typical of the realities of social justice or social injustice, people, civil society making a stand, and not following necessarily in the footsteps of all the isms of capitalism, socialism, communism. People are looking for something different. People have a voice. As we've seen around the world, the current challenges that we having globally around leadership and the lack thereof, and it's essential that we empower people, that we direct people correctly, and that leadership is used for good, because leadership can obviously, there are many prime examples of when leadership can be used for bad, because it's such a powerful skill. And it's to understand that anybody can be a leader. It takes practice, but most importantly, it takes the initiative to know that if you lead, it's a huge responsibility and accountability. You're there to influence. You're not there to tell. You're there to guide. You're there to support. You're there to direct. You don't have to lead people. You can lead yourself. You can lead a movement. You can lead an organization. But the actual skill set is something very, very human, and very, very necessary, and something that we, from my experience of being in leadership development, is something we grapple with all the time. How do we create a pool of people for the future? So when one leader leaves, is there going to be someone to replace that person? Right. So are there any questions around those human skills? As I said, we've just touched on a few. Before I continue, there are many, many, many more. I had to pull out some of my favorites. And as I said, it's about awareness. You've been exposed to all of these. They're not new to you. They're not foreign. Yet it's about understanding how powerful they are and how we can actually practice them in our whole life. And I think it's important. It's an important message there, that we practice these human skills within our family environment, within our social environment, and within our workspace. That we are one person. We don't have all these separate lives. We've also come from an environment or past where we were told to have your work life and your personal life. And we were told to leave your personal problems at the door when you go to work, which is all crap. It's absolute nonsense, because we are human beings. And in order for us to be fulfilled, and in order for us to offer our best, we need to be ourselves in every environment. And just to bring it all together, the work done by Carol Dweck is on mindsets. I think it underpins everything I have spoken about, because when I came across her work, it was really something that probably fundamentally changed my life, in understanding that we have a choice. We have a choice between a growth and a fixed mindset. And very simply, I'm sure many of you have come across this concept before, is that we do fluctuate between both. Nobody is perfect, remember. But the awareness is that when we are on a growth mindset, we believe that anything is possible, that we can grow and we can learn. And if I fail, it's a mistake, but I learn from it, that I must receive feedback. I can try new things. I'm not set in my ways. That I might be battling now, but this too shall pass. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know when COVID's going to end. I don't know when the war the war is going to end, the flooding's going to end, but I believe that it will. I have optimism, not positivity. I'm optimistic that this too shall pass, and there are potential opportunities. One door closes, another door opens. That is the growth mindset in a nutshell. What fixed mindset is that when we have no energy, if we're going back to empathy, when we are sapped, when we are having a tough time, when we have floods, when we have wars, when we have COVID, we can fall into this trap of going, woe is me. Why is this happening to me? This is so unfair. Social media punts this all the time. Everybody else is living their best life. I'm not. Everybody else has got an amazing imagery on their Facebook, on Facebook or Twitter, on Insta, and mine does not look like that. I have failed. The fixed mindset is that I can't change. I was born like this. When I give up, when I'm frustrated, I give up. I don't want to change. I can't do stuff. I'm not like that. That's how I was brought up. So it's really being stuck in the mud. It's negative. It's unconstructive, and the importance of understanding the difference between the two is that when you're in that space, because some days we wake up and we are feeling like that when life is tough. It's to realize that, hell, hang on, I'm in a negative space. Yeah, I need to do something to re-energize myself. Perhaps I haven't exercised. Perhaps I'm not eating properly. I haven't slept properly. So when we don't sleep, the power of sleep. If we don't sleep, nothing seems like we can cope with the world. When we do sleep, the world always seems far better. When the sun comes up, we feel far better versus when it's continuously raining. So it's just to remind ourselves that I'm in my fixed mindset. I need to get out of it. I'm woe is me. I'm having a pity party. But actually, the sun will come out tomorrow. The floods will subside. I can change. I'm not stuck in my job. I'm not stuck in this relationship. I'm not stuck in the inability to exercise or to eat healthily. I have a choice and I can do it. And linked to that is this slide. Liz Foslin, I don't know if any of you have come across her. She does amazing imagery, just takes complex things and really just simplifies them beautifully. And here is really about, we talk about this goal setting. And what it really is, we should be talking about habits. So if we're thinking about human skills, we tend to set these big, audacious, hairy goals that are very difficult to achieve. And we become despondent very quickly. As you can see, the little man on the left there has set these 3 massive goals and has made no progress. Versus the little man on the right who set lots of little teeny weeny little habits, and through making little changes has made progress and is making movement. And that's, as I said, it's such a simple concept, yet we fail at it all the time. We just have to make little incremental changes. Once we've made that change, it will give us the impetus and the ability and the confidence to make other changes. And that's how we climb the stair ladder, with little steps, not these big monster steps. Yes, it seems incredible when we set these big goals at the beginning of the year. And how many people set these goals and don't achieve them? It's because they're goals, they're not habits. So from a neuroscience perspective, when you're creating a habit, you're creating a new pathway in your brain. So we will always have our old pathways, our old bad habits. But if you think of it like a path that we walk along, as soon as you stop walking on a path, what happens? The wind comes, the rain comes, and it slowly gets covered. But underneath it, the original path is always there. If we need to create a new path, we must trudge on virgin grass. The more you walk on it, the more the path is going to be created. But it's only going to become a path the more you do it. And that's the neuroscience behind habits. The more you do it, the more it will stick. Okay. And going back to this slide is, we have a plan. And sorry, planners, that's the reality of the world that we live in. It's not going to always go according to plan. As long as we keep moving, sometimes we have to take detours, and as it says here, it's actually okay, because the detour might be teaching us something or showing us another direction or another solution or another idea. And sometimes we didn't want to go there, and it was awful, and it was a bad experience. Whether it's about whether it comes to relationships or roles or jobs or career choices, but there's a learning in it, and that's what a fixed mindset is. There's a learning in that. What did it teach me? So when the world or life throws crappy stuff at us, it's to say, what's the lesson here? So we can easily fall into the pity party and go, woe is me, why did this happen to me, this is so unfair. Rather, we need to go, what's the lesson? What am I to learn from this? What am I to take out of this so that it won't happen again? Or, wow, I learned something here I didn't realize, and I can take this on my journey as some luggage, as some tools and some tips and techniques. And then I wish I could say my dear friend Brené Brown, one day I'll hopefully will meet her. But I love the research she does. Those of you know she is a social scientist, and she went. Her journey was to go and disprove that human skills were necessary, because she was a black and white scientist, and there was no grey. And on her journey, she had a mental breakdown, discovered that the world is grey, and life is messy, and life is all over the place. But it's how I tackle it and how I deal with it is what's going to make me cope with it or not. And I really, her parting shots here of what she says around staying awkward, staying brave, and staying kind. If you take those three concepts, it really covers human skills and what I've been unpacking today around. We need to be awkward. We need to be uncomfortable. We've been taught, don't go into awkward situations. Don't be uncomfortable. Be comfortable. And yet, when we're comfortable, we learn nothing. We stagnate. It's only when we're uncomfortable and we go and challenge stuff and we go and question stuff and we go and have those awkward moments and those awkward conversations that we grow and we learn. And yes, we have to be brave. We have to be brave and we have to be courageous to do it. However, we must never forget the underlying fundamental principle of being human is to be empathetic and being kind to other people. Because without that, we're nothing. We're not a human. We are a bot at the end of the day. So that's me. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm going to Belinda. I don't know if you want to share anything that's in the chat. If anybody has asked any questions, or if anybody wants to make any comments, I'm happy to pass the difficult questions on to somebody else. I'll take the easy questions.
Thank you, David. That was amazing. I started this conversation by saying I learned today that 1 liter of water is the equivalent of a kilo. And now I've learned so much more. I'm going to have to break it down into little steps to process them all. That was really insightful. Thank you so much. I just want to say that the piece on empathy and compassion was really interesting, the way you explained that to us, that not all people are born with it. And obviously working with the people from Netcare, that's a big chunk of their lives. And I always thought that some doctors and nurses with a good bedside manner are just born with that. And then I've come across doctors and nurses who don't have a good bedside manner, and I'm thinking, why are you doing this job? But I think what you pointed out is that everything can be learned, albeit with time, and I also like what you mentioned on the give, because lots of us do that, and many of us don't realize how draining it is. Only at the end of it all, when you're absolutely deflated and depleted and exhausted, do you realize. Some of us go through life just giving, and we don't realize that it's what it's actually doing to ourselves. So I liked what you mentioned, the examples about the ability to re-energize. You forgot to add shopping. But
Great.
that was really good. And then another one of the points that struck a chord for me as well was listening. I like to think that I listen, but I think what you mentioned about being in a room and stuck with someone, and we don't always have the desire to excuse ourselves for fear of being rude. That's a really good point, and I'd like to perhaps comment or maybe get comments from the rest of the attendees on that, because I also come across people who just keep you talking for the sake of keeping you talking, or they love the sound of their own voice. And I just want to know, how do you excuse yourself without being rude? Because some people are quite smart and they can pick up that you're not wanting to listen to them, but they're not smart enough to keep quiet or to just stop. So this is me being awkward. How do I get out of a situation like that? Like, I'd love to hear some comments from everyone else.
Me too.
Come on, guys, be brave.
I've got a comment about that. So obviously myself and Belinda, we deal with quite a lot of people across our companies, and especially running an international network that's now in 13 countries. We're dealing with lots of different personalities, and it's not so much with our current member base, because they're all fantastic people, otherwise they wouldn't be.
They are.
But we deal with a lot of people who approach us, and even in a digital meeting, like, to harbour on this point, they speak at you and not with you. And for me, that's like the biggest turn off. Yes, I wanna know about the person, but I also want it to be a two-way street. So there's a bit of balance in the conversation, because then we can like start to help each other. So for me, the minute like someone starts talking at me for half an hour, they've just totally lost me. And I exaggerate my body language to the point where I show them that I'm not really interested in the conversation. But I do find that harder to do online, because they can't see my body language.
You go like this. Very hard. No, thank you. Thank you for that share, because it makes a lot of sense. It's also when people do that self-praising. I think you're touching on that too. And people at you, and they're rambling on about how awesome and wonderful they are, and all the amazing things that they're doing. And it does seem, like you said, Claire, that one-sided. It's not a two-way conversation. So you're trying to impress. You pick up the sense of people trying to impress. And that, to me, as soon as then, I suppose that's the authenticity and the realness goes away from me. There's like, I'm not feeling authentic and real here. It's just somebody trying to sell or tell me how wonderful they are. Their praise singer passed away, so they have to praise themselves. It's a very interesting topic, because we're talking about, we need to be honest, and we need to be direct and clear and communicate effectively, that we shouldn't let somebody carry on doing that. And sometimes it's unintentional, and that's the challenge too. Sometimes it's intentional and sometimes unintentional. The person's not even aware that they're doing what they're doing, and you even feel uncomfortable and sorry for them. You're like, oh, shame, I wish I could save them from that. They wish I would stop talking because they're embarrassing themselves. It's a very interesting topic. I suppose this redirecting the conversation. I don't know. For me, that's the easiest way without making someone feel uncomfortable, is redirecting the conversation if you can. But I suppose somewhere along the line, you've got to say thanks. I've got to go. I've got to move on to somebody else. We'll catch up. Well, part two. Let's pause here. Maybe somebody said that to me once. Sometimes you can say to people, can we just pause this conversation? Happy to continue at a later stage, but I need to go and speak to someone else. I'm sure you want to go and speak to somebody else. And then maybe people won't feel so bad by saying something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. That sounds good. That's definitely a learning curve for me. But like Claire said, so the best part of my job within the Africa Scotland Business Network is I get to onboard our new members. So I get to learn who they are from the very beginning and from the start of the journey. And because we are multi-sectorial, it's absolutely fantastic to learn what people do and to know which countries they reach and to learn something new. So I must say, within ASBN, when I have a new member, I'm all ears and I'm like wide open to learning and absorbing, and I like engaging with our members. It's absolutely fantastic what they do. I mean, we've got, I don't know if you guys read the last newsletter, but we've got someone who lives in Canada, but he's building houses in Malawi, in Africa, for example. And then we've got our major corporates who have a global reach. And then we've got our little guy who's a one-man show running a business. It's absolutely fascinating. And then we've got people like David King, who teaches us this incredible human skills and the importance thereof. So I must really say thank you very much, David, for your time. I appreciate it, especially with everything going on in your backyard. And I'm not talking about the tree felling.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure and enjoyed it immensely.
Does anybody have any questions before we let David go? Please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
No one's going to force you.
Okay. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, Claire, I don't know if you want to add anything, but David's contact details are on the last slide. And also, any of you, if you're looking for his details, you're welcome to write to me and I'll pass that on. And then, Claire, we're going to be posting this on our social media.
Yeah, we'll make it available on our website, africascotland.network. We'll also put it on our YouTube channel, so feel free to share it. Thanks, David.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely afternoon.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.